Okay, hi Mrs. Carlson. First off, before I start this video, I just want to thank you so much for all of your patience and your flexibility this semester, and just with everything that's been happening. I really appreciate it. So, I'm just going to try and do a run through of this pretty quickly so you're not sitting and watching a 40-minute video. So the first thing that I would start with in my lesson is I would explain to them who I was. I'm Amy, I go to the University of Akron, I'm a senior, and then I would explain to them that we are starting a parenting unit, and I'm going to intro that parenting unit by talking about parental readiness. And so then I would explain to them that because they are pretty far away from being parents, the importance of knowing that basis of knowledge before becoming a parent is crucial to having better parenting skills as you move along. So then I would open with 10 statistics, and I have these all on note cards, and what I plan to do is just read off the note cards, and then I had on the back whether they were true or false, and then the information below them. So I'll just read these, and this will help me gauge where they're at, and they're pretty interesting, so I thought that that would help them too. So the first one is 1 in 4 kids are being raised by single parents, and all these that I'm reading are true, yes. Not all of them, but this one is true. 1 in 4 kids are being raised by single parents. I'll ask all of them if they think this is true or false, and based on their answer, I will then read what is on the back. Families are having fewer children, true or false? And that is actually true. Parents still spank their children, that's true. 5% of children are cared for by stay-at-home dads, that's false. It is 20%. Babies without fathers are not at risk for poor health, that is false. They are at risk for poor health. More moms are working these days, that's true. Teen pregnancy on the rise, that's false, it's declining. Death is more disruptive for children than divorce, that is false. Divorce is more disruptive for children than death. I thought that was pretty interesting. Parents are saving enough money for their child's college funds, that's false. And many grandparents are raising their children, that's true. So this will give me a really good basis of knowledge. It'll help them get more comfortable around me, and it would help them to understand what we're learning about, give them some new facts that maybe they've never heard of. So after that, I would watch the John eating red sprinkles, and in this video, it's a 2-minute video, and John and he's about 2 years old, and his mother is filming, and she films him, and he ate red sprinkles, it's all over his face, and she asks him, did you eat the red sprinkles? And he keeps saying no, and I would ask the kids after we watched it, I would play it twice. First I would have them just watch it, then I would ask them the second time, be noticing how the woman's parenting is, what she's doing good, would you change anything? And so then after that, those are the questions I would ask them. Did the mother do a good job with John? Why or why not? How were her parenting skills? Were they good? Were they bad? And would you do anything differently? So from this video, I would hope that they would get, she was very direct with John. She would ask him point blank, did you eat the red sprinkles? And she would show him the evidence. John left like a huge container of red sprinkles spilled all over the floor, and he still said no. She had good eye contact with John, always asking him to keep looking at her. Then, kind of moving into the lesson, I would ask the kids, what is one of the most important decisions you've ever made? So hopefully a few kids would share that, and I would ask them, what factors did you consider? So say, I would explain, going to college was one of the biggest decisions I've ever made. And then the couple things that I was considering was close to home. I wanted to stay close at home. How much money was it? Did I like the campus? Did they offer the major that I liked? And then transitioning into that parenting is one of the most important decisions that they will ever make. So kind of getting their minds to think that way. Asking them then, how many of you want children, just by a raise of hands, and that will get me to understand how many of them maybe are interested in this phase of life. And then Mrs. Smith usually does a bell ringer, and this will kind of be the bell ringer except probably 15 minutes into the lesson. And I would ask them, what are the top 5 qualities of an excellent parent? So this is really getting them to think, what are some important character qualities that I would want to see either in myself as a future parent or somebody who is parenting a child I really want to see in them. And then I would explain to them an example that I think is very important is selflessness, and how that's a very important aspect of a parent. And then I would also ask them what factors are important to consider before having a child. So they'll get about 10 to 15 minutes to write about this on their own. I would play music if that was an option, and that will get them to kind of focus in on what they were doing. And so the second question was my hopes that maybe they already knew some of the information that I would talk about in my PowerPoint about financial readiness, a strong relationship, good physical health, some things like that. Then I would have them, this is the part where I had 4 different scenarios of examples of why not to have a child. So I would have them get into 4 groups, and then each group would get a different scenario card. So here are the scenarios, and I have the questions highlighted. So the first scenario is, you hope that parenting will make you give up bad habits. Jane is turning 30 and still hasn't grown up. She goes out every night of the week and on the weekends. She gets home at 4 or 5 in the morning. She just got fired from her job because she's always late. Is Jane ready to have a parent? It's pretty self-explanatory. They're going to say no. But kind of getting them to think more critically, what is the solution? Give an example of another poor reason to want to become a parent. The next scenario, everyone else is doing it, so I will. Same thing. Is this a good reason to have a child? Why or why not? What's the solution? And give an example for another poor reason to have a child. You think getting pregnant will sustain a relationship or not end one, and you want a child because you want someone to love you. And then after, I would give them about 10 minutes to discuss this in their group and write it down, and then that person who's writing it down will, to the class, discuss what their answers were. And then my hope is just that they would understand and they would realize that these scenarios aren't so far off from reality, because a lot of people choose into parenting because of these reasons. So then after the scenario, I would give them PowerPoint notes, and I'm going to just quickly show you what the notes are, and we'll just go through the slides pretty quickly. But there's only about 14 slides, so it wouldn't take long anyway. So this is just the start. I would ask them, because love is essential to parenting, but if that's all you have, is it enough? So I would ask them that, and we would discuss that for a couple minutes, see what their answers were. And then kind of just explain to them that parenting takes more than love. That, parenting happens even when we're not ready. There can be financial problems, an unhappy home life, lost goals, but it's no guarantee against problems. And just I wanted to talk about how parenting is such a big decision, but there really is no license to that. So they have to judge their own readiness based on indicators that we'll talk about. So the first one is, are you psychologically mature? I don't know if they'll know what psychological means, so it's related to their mental and emotional state. And just kind of some clues to their level of maturity. Can they give up short-term comfort for long-term comfort? Are they sympathetic and responsive? Do they set their own goals? So that's something that they can even think of right now, that will get them hopefully relevant to their life today too. The next one is, are you physically mature? So the birth of a healthy baby depends on the mother's physical maturity level. So they need to reach that proper stage of growth and development. If they don't have that, there'll be problems with the baby. There could be, they can be premature, so that's very important. And I know that Mrs. Smith already covered that when I would have taught. So they would have understand that the reproduction system of a female doesn't reach full maturity until after puberty. The next one is just physical health. That's very important. Nutritious diet. Do they get enough sleep? Do they have medical conditions? Is there drug or alcohol abuse? And then talking about a solid relationship is very important too, that children benefit from a stable relationship. And then I would talk about how that statistic really does play into everyday life, how marriages end, half of marriages end now, and how divorce is more disruptive for children than death. And that's a really sad statistic. So hopefully this would even be relevant to their life today. Is their relationship, if they're in one, is it a stable one? Are they comfortable with that person? Do they respect them? Do they settle disagreements? Do they share in common morals and philosophies about raising children, or common morals in general? Then just how having children isn't something that we should be taking lightly, although it is a joy. And then these are just some interesting statistics of maternity costs. Maternity care costs around $5,000, and a middle-income family raising one child from birth to 18 in 1997 cost $301,000, and then a middle-income family in 2013 from birth to 18 cost $241,000. So I thought that was interesting, and how finances are a very big part of having a child. If you can't raise the child, if you can't financially support them, that's a problem. So just a couple other factors to consider. Do you have a steady income? Does it meet your expenses, your rent, your mortgage, your car payments, your heating or your gas, or going out to eat? Or are you saving your money on a monthly basis? Do you have health insurance? What about your living arrangements? If you have a child, will you have to move? That's a really big consideration as well. And then this is a 6-step decision process that I would go through with them. And I bolded. Can they see this? Oh. I bolded all of the PowerPoint slides. I bolded what I thought that they would need to know. You can't see that. Okay. I bolded what I thought that they would need to know, so that is helpful for them when they are taking notes, because I would expect them to take notes on this. And then I would end with, no parent is perfect, and although you can be so ready, there are going to be things that happen and you don't know about. So after the notes, we would go into, depending on the time limit and depending on what Mrs. Smith had else to go over, we would do a compare and contrast activity with partners. So this is kind of going into the closure of the lesson. I would have them fill out one day, typical day for them. So a typical day for a teenager, I would just get a paper and fold it in half, and then on one half that would be their schedule. So in detail, I would want them to have the times and what they're doing. So they'd wake up, they'd eat, they'd go to school, they'd come home, they'd have soccer practice or something, and then they'd have homework. So getting them to think, okay, this is really all about myself throughout the whole day. And then the difference between, on the other side of that paper, what would a teen parent's day be like? So a teen parent would maybe wake up at 5 a.m. and feed their baby, and then they wake up at 6 a.m. and feed, and they'd have to get ready and bring their child to childcare, and then see that difference of their responsibilities. And then for their assessment, I would have them write probably 1 to 2 questions, because I think 3 to 4 would be too many. 1 to 2 questions on what they think a good exam question would be, and then they would switch that with their partners, and they'd have to answer those 2 questions and see how that would be. And then, so that is just getting them to think of some things that would be on exam. For an example, I would ask them, what are 3 character qualities a person should reflect if they want to become a parent? So some things that we talked about in the notes, psychological maturity, financial stability, and a solid relationship. Those are just 3. So that's an example. So depending on how long the lesson would be, I would add the compare and contrast activity. But other than that, that is what would happen. Mrs. Smith let me, and I talked to you about this, but Mrs. Smith let me kind of intro the lesson last week. So although I didn't teach this whole lesson, I did get quite a good amount of experience in the classroom with them. I got to intro, 30 minutes of a lesson, and I also got to help them with more individual activities. So although I didn't get to teach my whole lesson, unfortunately, I do feel like this still helped me, because I still got up in front of them and I still got to intro something, so that was really helpful. So this is kind of the run through of the lesson. Yeah.